real quick. All right, so I think that's working. All right, so good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for signing in for our final workshop in the series on test taking. So we may pick up a few more people, but that's okay. I think we can go ahead and begin. So I will go ahead and hand it over to Aban from the Dentist Learning Center.
Thank you so much. So hey guys, my name is Aban, and I am an academic coach for undergraduate and PhDs and graduate students at the Dentist Learning Center. And this workshop is on strategic and confident test taking. And before I continue, Happy New Year's, and I hope you guys have been having a pretty good holiday. So just to give you guys a little bit of introduction about who I am, like I said, my name is Aban. I'm a fourth year undergrad student. My major is biochemistry, and I have 4 minors in political science, bioethics, global public health, and English. So I am pre-med. So if any of you guys are pre-med or are focusing on some medical school STEM stuff and have any questions about that stuff, I'm more than happy to answer questions on that. Yeah, and these are some workshop expectations and guidelines. So we do not provide the PowerPoint and so forth. Sorry. So yeah, and like please don't take pictures and stuff like that because it is property at the Dentist Learning Center. If you do have questions, my chat feature should be working. I don't know why, like it's just been a little weird lately with my Zoom. So if you feel like you asked a question and I'm not answering it by any reason, feel free to unmute and ask me any question that you feel like is appropriate. So like I'm really flexible with that. Like I'm not really gonna be too like annoying or pesty about that. So I'm gonna try making this workshop as engaging as possible. It is a very important topic for people who are going through academic processes and so forth. So I'm hoping this presentation is helpful. So if there are no more questions, or if there are any questions, so the objectives of the presentation or of what we'll be talking about today is how to prepare for exams, how to take exams, and how to leave confidently. So this is the before. So before the exam, you definitely want to know like what content is being tested. So this can be what are chapters, specific like sections that your professor has talked about, and so forth, right? And for the most part, you should have a general idea what the format is of the exam. I know there are some classes that like the professor just doesn't want to give the format for whatever reason it might be. But for the most part, you should have a general idea what the format is, whether it's multiple choice, short answer, or a combination of both. Most exams now, from what I've seen, are going to be a bit of both, if not mostly short answer. So, and from there, like you should also definitely see the understanding of whether it's high, medium, or low on the specific content that is being tested. So this could be like the specific chapters, like I said, or the sections, and you should have a general idea of when you start studying what you feel really good with and what you definitely want to work on a lot. But ultimately, you're going to have to study all the content that is going to be tested. So what we recommend at the DLC is to create a study plan. So this is going back off what I said to identify the topics on the exam, break the topics into a day-to-day plan, design a study time, include strategies, self-test, and so forth. So something at the Dentist Learning Center that we recommend is a 5-day study plan. So which is pretty much incorporating all these things that I just stated. But another thing that I have been trying to reiterate to many students in one-on-one appointments and so forth is that maybe 5 days isn't enough for you. Maybe you want 10 days, 14 days, a month, whatever it might be. So at that point, it's the same thing that I just stated, but just a bit more expanded. And sometimes like one might think like, oh yeah, studying for more than 5 days is like a waste of time. Like we don't have the time. But ultimately, you're kind of taking the amount of time you're studying on a day-to-day basis like to a smaller increment, whether if you were studying compared to a 5-day than to a 7-day. So what you could do is like maybe if you're doing 10 days, the first 7 days you can specifically focus on content and so forth and kind of fill in those holes. While the last 3 days you're kind of focusing on going over whatever you think you might have missed, maybe just doing a quick skim, kind of refresh your memory. And then from there going into practice exams. And I don't think I can emphasize enough how important practice exams are, because professors, they like what they ask. They like the questions that they make. And there's a very strong correlation between what they ask and what is going to be asked on the exam itself, like between practice exams. So the odds of you getting an extremely similar question, if not in many cases, the same exact question based off a practice exam, is a pretty good likelihood. And by you not understanding the practice exams, not only are you understanding like what the questions, like what content's being going to be like asked, but also what you're expected to know and how you're expected to know it. So there's many layers to doing practice exams, and I think they're a very useful resource. So study strategies would be step one is to prepare. So this would definitely be, as I said, like organize the information to how you feel like it's best for you, whether it be flashcards, notes, whatever it might be. Again, every person is different. So for me, someone, I don't think flashcards are really that helpful. I'm more of a put everything on my iPad or my computer and kind of just read through it and just kind of process it like maybe a time, like couple times, just so I can understand it, and then ask questions or take my notes on my stuff and then ask the professor and so forth. So again, everyone is different, but try organizing the information. And this also kind of expands into step two, which is reviewing that information, which is again very personal to everyone else. A lot of people like going being in group settings and just kind of asking questions. I think that's a very useful resource because there's things that you might know, and there's things that someone else might not know, and there's things that the other person might know that you might not know. And it's just a good way to hold each other accountable. So be very cautious about this because it can waste a lot of time because it is very easy to get off topic. But again, it is a very useful resource in the sense that it will help you like kind of hold each other accountable. So this is just the same thing that I was just saying, kind of like develop whatever you think is right for you, write the questions, and then kind of find the answer to everything that you just reviewed in step one. So these are some studies, these are some examples. I think a mind map is very interesting. A lot of people do it. It's not, I haven't seen too many people do it, but it's a very useful strategy from what I've heard. So definitely if you're someone who likes kind of being a bit more intricate and a bit more like unique with the way you put things down on your like paper, mind map's definitely a way to go. Kind of like a review sheet and kind of diagrams. Again, note cards is something that I said is very good in kind of memorizing quick facts. So definitely whatever floats your boat. So there are only two people, so it's okay. We don't really have to go into a group discussion per se. But something that I just want you guys to think about is like, what is your favorite study strategy? Like, what do you think? Like when you study, like what is the way that you study? Like, do you study just by going over the book, the notes, like flashcards, whatever it might be? And what do you think is like the thing that you're most comfortable with? Because that's going to be a huge determinant on how you study. Hopefully, like how a more revamped way of studying moving forward after this workshop. And then again, from there, you ask, how do you usually study? Do you feel like there's something that you do in your scheduling when you come to studying that you feel like, okay, you know what, you're doing it, but it's just not helpful. Like it's not giving the results that you want. You don't feel like you're any smarter. You don't think you gain any knowledge after that technique. So these are things that you need to be very honest with yourself because there's no point in doing a strategy that's utilizing strategy that's just not going to work for you. And it's not a bad thing if the strategy is not working for you. It's just that it's just not a strategy for you. So that's something I feel like it's very hard to accept, but just understanding that is very, very important. So definitely be very honest with yourself when it comes to this. So the exam prep do's and do nots. So definitely proper sleep because like just like every other part of your body, your brain needs to rest. Your brain needs to regroup and definitely needs to just be able to be restful and be able to be fully active. Continue to socialize with people. Like keeping yourself like isolated, like that's going to be in the do nots, is just very miserable. Like you definitely want to go out and interact with people, kind of keep yourself active, keep those endorphins going and stuff like that. That's very important for you. So if you there's other ways to get stress out. Like for me personally, I enjoy going to the gym. I try going at least 5 to 6 times a week. But again, for other people, it's different. I used to spray paint. I used to go like longboarding through the lane garage and so forth. So like there's some other ways for you to just kind of like get away from studying, get away from whatever you're doing like academically. And that's very important. That's very important to just give yourself a mental break, give yourself a block from studying because that's just going to give your say another way to revamp your brain just to not drain yourself out. Maintain a regular diet is very important because you don't want to study hungry, because that's just, you're going to get headaches and other stuff, and that's just not good for you. And then use prep and review, whatever that might be for you, whatever the best way is for you. Again, for the do nots, it's just the opposite. Don't pull all-nighters. You don't want to go into an exam tired. Don't lock yourself up, because you're just going to be draining yourself at a much more expedited rate rather than just maintaining your focus and so forth. Don't just sit and study because you're just, like I said, just change your scenery. Do something to just keep your mind active. Get those keep those eyes more awake. Don't skip meals. Don't stress eat either. You don't want to overeat, because at that point, like the melatonin and all that stuff would start being released, and endorphins, and then at that point you just want to go to bed. So don't do any of that. And then also don't just skip one or the other. Like, try using as many of the resources at your disposal, because they are going to help you for the most part. So this is during the exam. Are there any questions before I move forward? I don't know if my chat feature is working, so I don't know if anyone's put anything into the chat, but if you have any questions, feel free to unmute right now and you can ask me. I'll give you guys a couple seconds. All right, cool. So during the exam, so so this is where, like, hopefully before the exam, you should have a general idea of what, like, your expected, like, format wise, right? Multiple choice, whatever it might be. So at this point, you want to ask, how much time do you have per question? So this is a bit more like, you should definitely see how much you want to spend time. Like, for example, if you have 30 questions and then you have 60 minutes, like, you definitely want to be spending, like, hopefully about 2 minutes per question. But the thing is that, like, you want to also, like, give yourself time for those harder questions. And I'll definitely go into more detail about that forward. So definitely find out how many questions are in the exams, determines the total time. And then at that point, like, you kind of, like, give yourself a little bit of time to kind of review the exam, see what you're being asked and so forth. I know it's a bit harder with, like, for example, electronic exams. So for example, if people have or are going to take general chemistry, you guys use Exemplify, which is kind of annoying because you can only do one question at a time. So it's not like you can see the whole test at one time. And there's other classes that do the same thing. But on, for example, a written exam, like, you can skip through the whole thing and see what you're being asked. And then from there, you can kind of articulate which way you want to go forward. So again, every exam is different. So, but this is just a general concept. Just kind of see if you can review as many questions as you can, if not all of them, and kind of see what is being asked and where you want to allocate your time first. So this is also coming to managing your time. So you have to make wise investments upfront, and you should get the easy stuff out of the way. So like I said earlier, I don't know if any of you guys are pre-med or in the medical field, but this is something that, like, for me, who's studying for the MCAT right now, that's something that is very important. For example, like the English section. Like the English section, you're only given, I think you have 53 questions in like an hour and hour-ish time, hour and 20 minutes time, and you have 9 passages. So a technique that I've been using is that, like, I've been going through, like, for example, if I have passage 1, I have like 7 questions per passage. I'm like going through the passage and seeing what question is the hardest, because the question that I feel like I need to spend the most time, like, looking for, or whatever it might be, I'm going to save that towards the end, because I want to be able to be like, okay, if I have a question which I can spend like 10-15 seconds on, okay, get that out of the way, because you want to get those smaller time consuming questions out of the way first, because at that point you'll have a better idea of how much time you can allocate towards those harder questions, right? So for example, a question that, an exam that's 60 minutes, you have to do 5 questions, and questions 1, 2, and 3 are going to take you 30 minutes, and questions like 5 and 6 are supposed to take you like a long time. Okay, get through 1, 2, and 3 first, get those out of the way, and then go to 5 and 6. And even if it's like 5 and 6 for the shorter ones, get 5 and 6 done, then go to the longer ones. So that's also another thing. Another thing is to keep on moving. Don't stop. give yourself a second to kind of like articulate your thoughts, but do not stop. Keep on going, and then because you're on the clock when it comes to a lot of these exams. So enhancing the accuracy. So when it's like a given or find, I would definitely underline the information that is given in the question. So for example, like when it comes to like a stoichiometry or a chemistry question, a lot of the questions they give you a lot of stuff. Like they'll give you the pressure, they'll give you like volume, all this stuff. So what I used to do is I used to like, and like because it was written, so I had paper, so I was like some given, and I underlined it and I wrote down everything that was given. And then on the right side, and like I wrote down like what I had to find, and it was like moles or something like that. So that's something that I was able to do because at that point, like I'm able to derive equations, I'm able to have everything in front of me. So definitely underline the information that is giving is definitely helpful, as well as also underlining what the question is asking you to find, because there can be a lot of unnecessary information in that passage or in the question that you don't need to worry about, but because it's just trying to throw you off. So definitely underlining what they're trying to ask and like focus on that. And then from there, it should help you dissect the passage, kind of skim through it a lot faster. So the exams, like the exam day do's and do nots. So something that is definitely eat healthy, have a proper breakfast or meal, pace yourself, strategize, relax, and breathe. Definitely try not to get in your head. Like at the end of the day, the only thing standing in your way of getting a good score or a proper score, whatever a good score might be in your eyes, is yourself. The exam is going to be it's going to have its rigor no matter what. It's going to be difficult. It's going to have its like anomaly questions that are just going to give you some stumpers. It's just to be expected. But at least with that, you can definitely kind of prepare to at least accept it and work around it rather than trying to just face it head on and kind of just be stumped during the exam. So definitely just kind of take the steps to kind of calm yourself and kind of just kind of hype yourself up just to know that you can do it. Um, I would not really try listening to others before the exam because that's just going to get in your own psyche. You're just trying to psych yourself out because other people are just going to be trying to like reiterate to themselves, okay, what do I know everything? Do I know everything? Like the amount of times I've walked into an exam room and there's just people just saying everything. And to a point, like there's some things that they say that I have no idea what they're talking about. And at that point, you can freak out. You're like, oh my God, that could be asked, so forth. So definitely just you put in the work. You should feel confident in yourself and so forth. Don't skip meal. You definitely want the glucose in you. And don't spend too long in a question, like we said before. Don't just jump right in. Try not to panic. It's easier said than done, but try not to panic. If you put in the work, if you study properly, you have all the resources at your dispensary to do well in this exam. So this is again like we do have a couple people, but just for your own like asking yourself, so what type of exams do you enjoy more? Like is it multiple choice, essays, so forth? Um, and like ask yourself why. Like for me, for example, I thought I used to like multiple choice. I really did. But more and more as I've gone through like my degree and I've kind of seen more classes, I've kind of started to enjoy essay questions more because it's giving me an opportunity to explain, giving me an opportunity to kind of like back up my answers and so forth. And but that being said, the professor can be lenient towards your exam and give you partial credit and so forth, even if the concept is completely wrong. That's why I kind of enjoy the essay questions more. But again, to each their own. And you can see like what questions do you like, what type of exams do you perform well on, and so forth. So definitely like know this because that can help you kind of like strategize the way you want to study. So to multiple choice exams. So you definitely want to try predicting the answer before you view the answer choices. So definitely read the question and then just be like, okay, what would I do? Like, what is the process? What would I do? And then kind of brainstorm what the rough idea of that is. And then from there, try finding the answer. Or from there, solve the question, then see if your answer choice is there. So stuff like that will help like at least validate what you're doing. If not, and it'll also tell you if you're doing something wrong. So definitely something that I would highly recommend. And in most cases, it's also decide what's most correct. Sometimes you're going to be in a situation where you feel like, it could be one or another. It could make this could make sense. This other one could make sense. And it's very difficult. It's more like a 50-50. But at that point, you're trying to make it a 60-40, a 70-30. You're trying to see, okay, what could be the most right based off what you're given in the question, based off your own knowledge, what would be the right question? Like what would be the right answer, excuse me. So stuff like this is like kind of just more like educated guesses, but like a bit more educated than guessing. So definitely trying to like kind of focus on that and then kind of just eliminate if it's incorrect, irrelevant, like the answer choice just makes no sense and so forth. So definitely eliminating your answer choices would help narrow down to the right answer. So like this is just an example exam question. So definitely like we said, like underline like see like these are the questions that could be kind of stunk or like sticky, like the should, because at that point it's more of an assumption, right? It's not like which will or what will, because if it's like a more demanding thing, then they're probably gonna have to give you a passage or like something else that's more concrete in like evidence for you to answer. But like for should, that's more like, okay, we're giving you the information. Now make it an analyze the information that we've given you and make a educated like answer based off that. So that's why it's a bit more like different. So like this is just the thought process going into it. You can definitely eliminate it and so forth. And then just kind of give yourself the reasoning behind why each question is either right, possibly right, or just wrong flat out. And then based off that, you can make the answer, right? So definitely using like preparation and review strategies, and it's just the best guess and so forth. And dealing with multiple answers, it's going to be the same thing. Um, the best ways, because like for this, it's probably gonna be like, okay, it's gonna ask you a question that's gonna give you like a 1, 2, and 3. And then your best bet would be like, okay, which one of these is right? Like 100% right. Then for example, like if like out of 1, 2, and 3, 2 is right. Okay, whichever answer choice has 2 in it has to be right. But whichever one doesn't have 2 is definitely wrong. So you can definitely eliminate it. And at that point, you're just kind of eliminating it based off that. And then the options they give you, you can kind of just derive like what is the right answer and so forth. Um, go with your gut. Only like the only time you should really change your answer is that like if you're just kind of like recalling different information and it's just clearly invalidating what you chose earlier. But if you feel like you don't want to change your answer and because of the information that you're given, because of prior knowledge, so forth, don't change it. Because more often than not, you're probably going to be right and you just change it to the wrong answer. So definitely stay true with what you feel like you have and so forth. So that will definitely help. So essay questions, it's definitely going to be based on content and organization. So with the content, you definitely want to be more what's the most important and provide only relevant information. It's very easy to mass explain a question. It's very easy to just give a knowledge dump on the paper. Trust me, it might seem like that's your best bet when it comes to like an essay question. Just, you know what, I'm going to write down everything that I know and the professor can deal with it. The professor or the TAs are not going to do that. The professor and the TAs are going to see what you wrote down. They're going to look for the 3 or 4 basic points that they need to give you full credit. If they don't see that clear and evident, they are not going to give you credit. Just this how it is. So avoid mind dumps because it's very, very difficult for a grader to grade it. And it often gets them very annoyed. So definitely don't push that. Excuse me. Definitely like this is where you analyze like familiar topics and like the verbs and like kind of underlying what they're asking for you to do. And what I would recommend is that your best bet is to answer the question. So for example, it's asking you like, what is the color of the sky? And explain why you think that is. Be like, oh yeah, the color of the sky is blue. Kind of answer that question, give it like a concrete detailed answer. And then from there, you do your explanation. From there, you do your response and your analysis and so forth. Give them the concrete answer. Don't like, you could also just start with the analysis and answer at the very end, but your best bet, just so your grader can see the answer, is just to answer the question first. And then from there, just give the reasoning to why you think that's the answer. So that's probably your best bet. So this just goes back to what I was just saying, communicating your argument, definitely make the claim, and then from there, do the evidence. And then another form of evidence can be to use examples, explain the relevance and explain the significance, and that can definitely help you kind of reinforce your answer. Like this is just exactly what I was just saying earlier. See, like there's like the goals, the effort, and the self-efficacy. So definitely kind of like see where like see how it's like very clearly outlined. So definitely try doing that, because the more clear it is to the grader, the easier it is for them to grade it. And honestly, sometimes they're even more lenient towards you, even though that's easier. That's not always, but like make it easier for the grader as much as possible. And I know there's time crunches and so forth, but definitely try making it as easy as possible for the grader. So here's some helpful tips. Definitely state your position, like we were saying, and just keep on moving. Um, Definitely make sure, like, when you're like answering the question, like check off like what is being answered or what is being asked, excuse me. Don't leave like a question like unanswered and so forth, because that's just going to lose you credit and so forth. And here's some more strategies and so forth. So check your language, try being like as grammatically correct as possible, but again, every professor is different, looking for different things. So that is the end of the workshop, but I will open it up for any questions that there are. Again, thank you so much for attending. I know this is still in break, but thank you again for so much for attending. And if you have any more questions or any questions at all, feel free to ask right now. And I'm just letting you know that there are other workshops available. Coaching is available one-on-one. If you want to have a coaching plan with me one-on-one, I am available on Sundays online from 10 to 6. And yeah, if there are any questions, feel free to unmute and ask me right now.
Yeah, thank you, Avan. If there aren't any other questions, we can go ahead and wrap up. So yes, thank you for that wonderful presentation. And if you think of any other questions later, don't hesitate to email. I'll put my email address in the chat and I can always pass those along if needed. So thanks for your attention. Best wishes to all of you for the start of classes next week. Yeah, thanks for giving us your email address as well. And yes, I hope to see you around campus. Thanks a lot.